Well, hello, everybody, and thanks very much for attending. We have a lot of people online. This is the first of a series of at least four expert panel webinars that we'll be doing on a weekly basis. Now, when I first had the idea for the expert panel series, it was before the crisis, and I was thinking about having some leading safety experts from different global companies, just talking about things like, leading indicators. What do you really believe in? But not a not a theoretical answer, but much more a rubber meets the road type of answer. Or recordable injuries have come down over the last few years, but serious injuries and fatalities have not. Well, why? Or how do you balance accountability with just culture? But now with the crisis, obviously, number one priority for everybody is, if you will, coping with COVID. So we sort of changed, did a quick audible. Today we have four experts with us to talk about what are they doing at their companies with COVID and what are they doing to engage the people at home. And then we're going to come back and ask them all, what are you doing to get the people ready to go back to work, or to help everybody get prepared for the great return? And we'll likely have to carry that one over next week because there's just so much going on and things change all the time. But these people were kind enough, everybody, to donate their time. They're just saying what they're doing. When I was talking with the European panel yesterday, Mariana, she's Corporate Health and Safety Director for Cargill in Europe, and she said, Larry, regardless of the credentials somebody has, you're not an expert until you've had experience with something. And none of us have really had experience with anything quite like this before. But I'm happy to say what we're doing, and hopefully that'll help some people, or at least confirm that you're on the right track. Hopefully you'll get a few new ideas. I also like to say that I've really enjoyed talking with all of these people over the years, and I really hope you will too. But like I said, nobody's an expert until you've had experience. That said, Anthony Panapinto from Procter & Gamble has had a great deal of experience with pandemics before, although as he's told me, nothing's quite like this one. We also have Ed Stevens. He is the Global Health and Safety Director for ABB. John McGilvery, who's the Manager of Health, Safety, and Environment for Scott Forge. And Ken Tooten, who is the Senior Vice President for Continuous Improvement with Crown Cork and Seal. And before I forget, my co-host and, if you will, color commentator, Teg Matthews, has been talking with about 50 or 60 other corporate safety leaders in North America. And so Teg's going to sort of give us a bit of the how does this reflect, or how does it compare with what he's sort of heard from the general public. And then I'm also going to talk a bit about how does it reflect in terms of the European folks and people around the world that I've talked to. So if I could, Anthony, I'd like to just start with you. I know 27 years at Procter & Gamble, and I'm not sure if I can remember all of it or not. I think you told me N1H1, SARS, Avian 1, Avian 2, but there were a few others. So maybe if you could just start off a bit with your I don't know, your rap sheet in terms of pandemics, and then obviously, just for the folks who may not know, just a bit of perspective of Procter & Gamble.
Okay, thanks, and thanks for having me today. Yes, this isn't my first trip to the rodeo of pandemics, but this is much different than others. I went through SARS in 2003, avian in 07, swine in 09, MERS in 14, Zika in 18, and now COVID 2020. So, and just want to give people some context to my comments before I get into it. So Procter & Gamble, we're a multinational consumer products company. We make lots of different brands that we hope you love and use at home. We have 132 manufacturing sites across the globe. And part of the context of this conversation is going to be that we really didn't have any major shutdowns. So I'm going to walk you through the phases of what COVID meant to us. As Larry said, I have 27 years with P&G. I come at this from a background of preventive medicine and industrial hygiene. And so I may give some different perspective than some of the other panelists in terms of how I look at this. So really, as my first calls on COVID began on January 6th, it was really trying to understand what was the relevance of this new virus, what was happening in China, and really specifically, initially, it became really a rescue mission. So who is out on the road? Who's located where in the world? Who do we need to get back home? Who do we need to quarantine and make sure that they're safe? So it went from that into a transition of some shutdowns in China due to the extended New Year. And then as we got the picture that this was going around the world, it really became, so how do we keep as an essential manufacturer? And I know that may be surprising that toilet paper and shampoo were considered essential, but just about every government in and around the world conceded that that was important. And so we were really up in operation throughout this duration. So it meant creating new habits and practices for the plant, given what we were learning about the virus. It meant, as we had non-essential employees working from home, it meant having contacts with them, relevant contacts about HR policies and access to care. We set up a COVID information hub that had all sorts of information, internal and external, to maintain communication with employees. As we got into the transition with the sites of having to pick up those new habits, lots and lots of questions arising about everything from disinfection, about isolation and what that meant in the workplace, or social distancing. So really trying to create a lot of information. As you go through these things, you tend to learn a lot. And one of the challenges that we initially faced was, how do we deal with all the communication happening outside, all the communication, some of it erroneous in mass media, governments taking different positions, and running a company that has 134 sites or 132 sites across 86 countries. You start to get into a pool of confusion and fear. So one of the things that we stepped back, we started to use some AI tools on the preventive medicine and pandemic response team to get, really, if you think about it, since February, there's been 57,000 publications on COVID in scientific journals, some peer-reviewed, some not, and really trying to get the best information together and ensure that the sites have the best information to do risk communication down the whole platform. And we got people involved at home by sending thank you notes to the sites that were operating, and then we had this really fortuitous, wonderful thing happen, which was our Force for Good program, where we came up with ways to retool manufacturing to produce things like hand sanitizer and face shields, barrier protective masks, and even respiratory fit testing solutions. So using our capabilities that we have to produce consumer products to do some good, and we got families involved in that, and it really gave us a tri-fold message of let's be safe in our operations, let's adapt to these new habits and practices in a COVID environment, let's continue to deliver products that our consumers want and will give them comfort during this period. And then we have these aspirational programs that got everybody involved in helping hospitals and helping the frontline workers and helping mutual assistance authorities. So it led to a great communication. And then really down to the plant floor, we found a use for Microsoft Teams in giving access to experts like myself who are reading the journal articles. Ask any question you want, call us anytime. And then we had these weekly grand rounds. So in the spirit of the doctors, we did grand rounds twice a day on Wednesdays for the hemispheres, where we brought forth critical communications on what's happening in the world outside, what's happening locally where our plants operate, the scientific information, and leaving it open for questions and answers. So we brought a real face for people to these habits and practices, the concerns that we had, and even, we got questions like, well, can my dog get COVID? Can my cows get COVID? All sorts of off-the-job sorts of questions, which led us to different streams of research. So I can't stress enough that communication is really the key, because there's so much confusing information out there. And as we progress to bringing more people back to the workplace, we've now got to develop those habits and practices, those COVID social distancing norms, the mask wearing norms, to a whole new group of people. And that's what I'm really losing sleep about at night. How do we bring them into the fold, and how do we prevent complacency creep as we bring folks back into the workplace who have been sitting at home, mostly working in their PJs over the past 6 to 8 weeks?
Okay. And Anthony, thank you so much. I mean, I remember you talking a bit about, the efforts you were making just to combat the false information. Also, you tell me on the phone, you got a vice president of manufacturing walk by your desk. He saw just the stacks of papers. So what are you doing? And you're saying, basically, I'm trying to sort out what's real, what isn't for everybody, so that we're providing a valuable, concrete information service. So Anthony, thank you so much. Ed, maybe if we could just move on to you. What are you guys doing in terms of coping, where you're operating? How are you engaging the folks who are working at home? And just anything else along those lines you'd care to add?
Well, like Anthony, we are a very large organization. We have 200 manufacturers, facilities globally. We operate in over 100 different countries, and a lot of the stuff I would say right now would echo exactly what Anthony described. It's about re-educating the workforce, understanding how do we say safe, how do they say safe while they're working in our facilities, and then how do we take that information home to their families, and then how do they stay safe when they're at home. And we do have to venture out into the grocery stores. Some of us do drive-through pickup of restaurants. So when we venture out of our home, it's very important that they understand the things that they need to look for, so that they can keep themselves healthy and their families healthy, so that they don't bring that virus back to the facility. So, we're doing the thermal imaging. We're doing medical checks, temperature checks. We're screening suppliers before they come in. We're asking them to show us their protocols. What are they going to do to make sure that they don't bring that virus into our facilities? But all of that has to start with that education, opening that communication, getting people engaged, understanding what's real material, what's not so real, and getting on a game plan that's standardized, that we all can relate to, and just get that become part of the DNA. We find out that the way we housekeeping techniques we had in the past were not sufficient for the things that we're doing today. The gathering, it's naturally for humans to gather and want to be in close proximity of each other. It's also natural to want to walk across the facilities. So, trying to isolate those groups while they're at work, so that we can keep track of any kind of exposures we might have. So there's a lot of different things that we're doing to help mitigate or reduce the risk that we have. And mostly that's around controlling the environment, controlling the much of it that we have control over, so that we can learn and continue to manage this business. And like Anthony says, that we start to bring more employees in, as we start to loosen and allow other stakeholders or suppliers to visit our facilities, we have to be very cautious, and we have to really make sure we take a look at their programs, that they're doing the things, they're following the CDC guidelines, and they're doing all the things that they need to do to be safe, not only when they're away from our facilities, but also while they're at our facilities. It's the same way, so that they have to make sure that they're on the same page as we are. Larry, you might be on mute.
Yep. No, I know. I just realized that performance there. I go, yeah, you could be on mute here. Ed, thanks very much for that, Ed. I know managing the information and the trust, and I know, talking with both of you before, the concerted effort that your companies were making for transparency as well too, right? In other words, to really be making an effort to get the right information out to people. Ken, just very quickly, and then we'll bounce off tag and come back to you. But Ken, just how's that compare overall with what you folks have been doing?
So Larry, thanks a lot, and again, thanks for being invited to the panel discussion today. And clearly, there's a lot of overlaps with companies that are facing this COVID response issue, and many of the things that we're doing have already been expressed, albeit we may not be doing them in exactly the same way. But early on, we stood up a task force inside of Crown, and it's being led actually by our chief operating officer. And on that committee is the VP of Human Resources, our Chief Legal Counsel, President of the Americas, and 2 staff physicians. We're fortunate in Crown to, for the last 20 years, been pursuing a wellness culture. And we're finding that having gone down that path in our previous history is really becoming a leverage point for us in terms of being able to stand up these kinds of health-related responses and do some really powerful things in terms of our internal and external stakeholders.
Okay, well, well, thanks. Oh, sorry, go ahead. Go ahead,
That's
Ken.
okay. That's fine. That's good.
All right, well, take let me just, because I want to come back to you, Ken. How's that all jive with sort of what you've been hearing? I don't want to say you're the consensus of the whole world expert here,
No.
but you have been talking to lots of people, and these were
Yes.
fairly deep dive conversations. So how's that reflecting or comparing with what you've heard?
It all resonates. It all resonates very, very strongly. If there's a few things Anthony said at the beginning, you tend to learn a lot, and there's been a huge thing from talking to these organizations over the last sort of like 4-5 weeks, how what organizations have been focusing on has evolved and changed. And it's evolving incredibly quickly, and different organizations are at different points, but essentially the issues they're dealing with fall into systems, kind of leadership, kind of cultural kind of issues on one side, and also the skills for the individual. So again, what Ed was saying, in making sure that people have the right skills, how do we support them at home, how do we, all this stuff resonates very, very strongly with the issues that organizations are facing and struggling with.
Yeah, and so far, I have not touched my face yet with my hands on this broadcast. Just a matter of time, I think, everybody. I think we've all realized just how difficult some of the simplest little habits could be. So, John, let me, if I can, come over to you, and you could tell us maybe a bit about you've I mean, you've been operating essential services. I can remember going through your plant when you said, Larry, I cannot confirm nor deny what that round piece of metal is over there. And so you guys have been operating at the 3 plants. So just tell us maybe a bit about what you've been doing, and if you want, John, a bit about what you're doing to get ready once everything starts opening up. I know you and I talked briefly about this a couple of days ago too.
Yeah, thank you very much for having me here, Larry.
Oh, you're welcome.
Our company, Scott Forge, has been operating at full capacity since this whole pandemic started, and as the threat of the virus continued to grow, and we knew that it was going to certainly impact our nation and our direct area. The first thing that we did was create the response team, just like every one of these organizations has done. But we pulled off the shelf the old 2009 H1N1 plan. So, as advice to all the organizations out there, this may never happen in your lifetime there, but having some type of framework to begin with is so critical. And so as you look at business continuity plans, whether it's from a natural disaster or a medical disaster like this, it's so important to have that plan first. And then, as we are going through this, as Anthony was talking about this, trying to weed out fact from fiction, trying to weed out hysteria from how do we operate in this environment and keep our people safe? Because we told our people first and foremost that we are all in this together, that we will get through this together, but we have to change, and we're going to have to change together. So we are going to to the best of our ability, our people inside our four walls and make sure that they don't bring this stuff home to their families through what we're doing. So tremendous amount of communication that has been talked about, and forming those personal habits. And we've had the experience of doing this now for 6-7 weeks since our stay-at-home orders were issued, and we had to develop those habits, the social distancing, and making this a 24/7 mentality. What you do outside of work matters so much, because it's so much easier really to control it within a plant environment. Hey, here's the procedures on cleaning. Here's the procedures on social distancing. And we're not great at them. You will never get great at these, because, we're trying to overcome, lifetimes of habits in the matter of days and weeks. And that is a real big challenge. So you've got to be willing to be having those conversations out on the shop floor, in the office area when you see it. And it's not, hey, I've told you this 5,000 times. This is, hey, I'm looking out for you. I'm looking out for each of your families. Please, take a few steps back from one another, keep each other safe. And we've done all sorts of visuals out on the shop floor, literally on the shop floor, visuals, stickers on the floors, reminding people, please stay 6 feet apart. Please don't stand in the aisleway. The increased number of communication tools that we've been using out on the shop floor, we've certainly increased the supply and availability of radios, and with earpieces, so that people can hear the communication and don't need to be within that 6 foot distancing. And we did a real big step in that we decreased the density within our office environment. Our business does not lend well from working at home, and we're an employee-owned company. So we made the cultural decision that we're all in this together, as I mentioned before. And so, but we did take the steps in our office to get additional space available for people to sit in. And really, in the office environment, we're probably anywhere from 9 to 12 feet desk space to desk space away from each other. So far beyond the 6 feet that the CDC is recommending. And then, as was mentioned, Microsoft Teams is a huge component of our life, where 6-7 weeks ago, Microsoft Teams did not exist in our organization. It was not part of our daily life. And that fast, we turned on a new piece of technology that has helped us in many ways communicate more effectively. And what we're trying to do through this time is get very creative in how we do what we do, so that we can utilize these lessons learned and make ourselves better during the chaos. And, one of the things that you and I talked about early on, Larry, was the simple fact that things are going to change so rapidly. What we did 3 weeks ago is very different than what we are doing today. And in fact, our governor of our state is about to sign some amendments to the stay-at-home order that are going to really change some of the social distancing requirements. And so we have, an obligation to stay on top of that, especially when you're operating in multiple states. How does this state's compare to your state's requirements? So those changes are critical. Having the communication, having the factual information, having the ability to teach those new habits, and then putting the obligation to maintain those habits. That's both inside and outside of work. There are a lot of organizations that really believe, hey, we're gonna shut things down, we're gonna do a deep clean, and we're gonna bring everybody back. And those are effective for killing the bugs that may be present at that moment in time. But if you're not doing that cleaning on a daily basis, on a per use basis, then the first time somebody touches something, that deep cleaning may not be useful anymore. So it's really important that, yes, we increased what the janitorial staff was doing, but we certainly changed the habits on what each of us are responsible for. And we're doing it not only to protect ourselves, but I'm protecting the people that I work with. And ultimately, we are protecting our people's families through that.
Wow. Yeah, I mean, one of the things I remember was I just can't remember exactly who it was when I was talking about, you really, the reality of one child contacting another child to a parent, bringing it in, and now we have to shut down for 2 weeks. Maybe it was you, Ed, that said this before. I'm not sure, but trying to communicate that with everybody that, that's all it really takes. It's one little invisible leak, and we may have to shut this facility down for a couple of weeks, everybody, and that's just the way it is. And so far, people have been, it's been really good. Anyhow, John, thank you so much. Ken, just moving back over now again to you. Tell us a bit of what's happening at Crown Cork and Seal. Maybe just a bit about Crown Cork and Seal too, because
Sure.
the scope of the company as well. I remember you telling me some facilities, well, quite a number open, quite some had to close, but that was mostly because of the government, not necessarily because of outbreak. But go ahead and correct me if I got any of that wrong, Ken.
No, thanks, Larry. And so Crown Cork and Seal, we're a rigid packaging company, a transit packaging company, and we have 239 manufacturing facilities operating in 47 different countries, 33,000 employees worldwide. I'm the Vice President of Continuous Improvement for the Americas Division. And in the Americas Division, 48 plants spanning from Canada to Brazil, 7,500 employees. And as you can imagine, a lot of complexity when you start, and as many of the companies are multinational here or global on this call, but it gets really complicated very quickly when you start thinking about regulatory and you start thinking about all the different nuance that goes on from continent to continent. And so in the America space where I work, we're fortunate to have 43 out of 48 plants in full operation, and we stayed in operation. And so, as I was mentioning earlier, we stood up that task force because we knew early on that we were going to need to make sure we were providing, every ounce of support we possibly could to literally what we refer to as our heroes in the field. Our people that are out there on the front line every day, supplying products, packaging, if you will, that holds nutritious food and beverage for the various customers that we service around the world. So we're in the middle of this thing. We have been fortunate, I think, in the North American space to have less of an impact than, say, in Europe. Our largest exposures that we have seen have come out of the European space, but we continue to operate. Early on, we recognized as a company that there were really three aspects that we wanted to make sure we were really honed in on, and it was obviously the physical safety of our employees and our facilities, but equally as important, the psychological safety of our employees as well. And we recognized, I come from an operational bent, and it's really, really important, I think, to make sure that we recognize the psychological impact that people are going through, not just on the job, but outside of work. As they're contemplating, what's going on with my family, what's going on with my community. And we want to make sure we have the mechanisms inside of the factories to get people really anchored and settled, and let them know that there's a degree of certainty that we have them fully supported with our policies and procedures. In North America, we've only had really one case that I'm aware of where we had to actually do contact tracing and shut down for deep cleaning. But we've been prepared for these kinds of things for some time because we follow the safe quality food standard in the majority of our operations in North America. So fortunately for us, good habit strength procedures that we've had out there for quite some time around cleanliness, hand washing, they're all part of what we do every day, being part of the supply chain for food safety. So we've been able to leverage those things. Clearly, like everyone else, we've added to the ability to make sanitation autonomous where we can and give people total control over their space so that they can keep their workstations clean. We've certainly put up barrier protections where it makes sense in our operations. And by the nature of how we produce, we're not necessarily on top of each other in the manufacturing processes anyway. So we've had some advantage around that. And then in terms of preparation for office space, actually, it's been probably more of a shift in paradigm when we start talking about how are we dealing with the people that are in the asymmetric support positions like mine and others who work in an office setting or travel to plants and support people through their roles. And we've learned very quickly that to where we used to have fairly rigid structures around meeting times and schedules, we've clearly shifted now to make it much more autonomous and asymmetric for our people, and we're focused on the results of the work, not necessarily what hours of the day the work is getting done. And I could tell you that I think that response has been helpful. People will certainly appreciate that, and it's helped to alleviate some of the stress and the balancing issues they feel between trying to maintain their workflow plus take care of issues at home with family and all the other disruption that's been going on, frankly, in regular life. We're really sort of operating on the model that you can't over communicate in this space. So that process that we set up is a daily process, and it's top down, bottom up. As I said, we have a senior staff that meets on this in a global sense every day at 10 a.m. We're a lean operating company, so short interval control practices are something that are very normal for us. And so we set up that communication structure in such a way that we can quickly roll up any sort of exposure concerns that we've had around the world at a very quick call, disseminate that information and/or direction back down the chain of command to the plants. And fortunately for us, we're not missing a beat in terms of our delivery to our customers out there. In fact, our North American businesses on the beverage can side of production remain sold out, and demand is actually increasing in this space. So fortunately for us, that's been a good thing.
Wow, very very fortunate, certainly. Oh, Ken, thanks so much. Certainly I remember the transparency, the communicate. Obviously, a big focus. Teg, what just if you were kind of sort of thinking about what everybody said, anything outside of that you've heard from some of these folks, or what have you heard the most of that was similar?
Do you know that last point that Ken made about demand? That's something I said it earlier on, that this conversation is evolving very, very quickly. So 2 or 3 weeks ago, no one was really thinking about going back to work. Then suddenly that was a piece. The piece around contractor management is something that's been appearing over the last week or 10 days. People have been thinking about that. How do we manage our visitors coming onto the site? But the other thing that Ken just said about demand, that's something that I've been hearing the last 3 or 4 days, actually. Organizations are saying increasingly that demand hasn't dropped off the way that they have expected, in certain industries anyway. And they're talking about not only going back to work now, but going back to work almost at an accelerated rate, which of course increases potential risk and exposure. You've got fatigued people working in this weird environment, new policies and procedures. It's all highly relevant, but it's this communication piece, and how do we make sure our sources are good, and how do we disseminate that information to our workforce?
Yeah, I think so. Just our schedule, for instance, for these webinars. I mean, we thought things were going to take longer because that's what everybody was saying, hopefully not October, November, but nobody was thinking that on Friday, Texas was going to be opening. Okay, so, or Tennessee. Now granted, the gyms are opening in Texas. Sorry, they're opening in Tennessee. They're not opening in Texas. So I think, like Ken was saying, you've got all, different standards right within 2 adjoining states for something that you think would be fairly straightforward, like, can you go to the gym and do it safely, or can't you go to the gym and do it safely? So a lot of challenges out there. We're going to come back to some of the questions, and the contractor thing, Teg, is a big one that we've been hearing from. But we've sort of, the one next week is going to be, we were originally going to do, the challenges of, and how do you properly manage distance learning and remote delivery, and can you get behavior change? Because we thought we were all going to have to hunker down till the fall. So we've changed our order up just so we'll be talking more about going back. And one of the things that everybody wants to know is, the management of contractors. Will there be a standard that we could, have some sort of assurance or security in, or whatever, so that we knew that the contractors we were dealing with were following the right procedures and guidelines and had the right personal protective equipment and all that sort of stuff. So, Anthony, back to you maybe, and just we've got a few minutes from each of you, and then we're going to also hopefully open it up to some of the questions from the the audience out there. You can just enter them in on your chat line. But go ahead, Anthony, and just sort of tell us a bit about where you guys are at now. We'd all really like to know when everything is going to be better and when we should open up, Anthony. So if you could be just kind enough to tell us when that would be, that would really help us all in our planning.
Yeah, I would love to do that, but I won't place any bet with you, Larry, on that one. So we're really focused in our recovery strategy on, again, we have a whole lot more people coming back to the workplace in phases. So we're doing this planning today based on what we know in various geographies in which we operate over about a 7 to 8 week period, slowly ramping up for non-essential personnel. We're figuring out how we're going to structure facilities into cohorts so that contact tracing is relatively easy. How do we maintain social distancing? How do we get people into the fold of thinking about this as a 24/7 exposure risk type
Absolutely.
of profile? So what we do at work, what we do at home is really important. Let's not bring the virus to work. Let's not take the virus home. And just really changing that mindset and getting people focused on those tasks and some of the different things they're going to see in the workplace. So I think as we think about doing phases, we're really just trying to really bring simple communications to everybody in advance of their return. How are we going to reinforce on the office floor, just like we do on the factory floor, with behavior-based types of influencing and reminding people of what's really important, because this really gets down to their health, their coworkers' health, and their family's health. So how do we really bring that real, and yet with inconsistent messages on the outside about whether you should go to the gym or whether your tennis club's going to open or how many people can sit in a golf cart and those sorts of things, it gets difficult. And we have to come to some common ground. And that's one of the things that we're wrestling with, is how do we bring a scientific, health-based rationale to each of the decisions that we're making, and really making that understandable to everybody, if that makes sense.
Oh, yes, it does, Anthony. And I just reminded, as soon as you said that, I was running a conversation I had with John, I don't know, yesterday, the day before. He was saying, Larry, they're making the new regulations for the opening up or whatever, but I drove by the tennis club, and as you said, John, it wasn't inspiring, was it? Right? So yeah, I think we're all impatient too. Alistair was from Outokumpu in Europe, was saying, Larry, the people have been holding together pretty well, but the edges are getting frayed. The edges are getting frayed. We're seeing some signs of that right now. So we're really trying to get everybody to just a little bit longer. Don't lose patience. We go back too fast, things could all the progress could be undone, right? So
and Larry,
on all of that.
And Larry, on that point, I think we're what I'm coaching people to think about this is in terms of resiliency through the fall at a minimum, because we might expect a second round of this. The other thing is really trying to again get people to be thinking about this as a long-term behavior shift. Whether we get a second round in the fall or the winter, whether we have a vaccine next year, we can't really depend on any of those mitigation factors. So let's make sure that we have, at least we're thinking about sustaining these behaviors and habits and practices for at least the near future.
Wow. Yeah. Well, I think that's really good advice too, Anthony, that this is, we all want it to be over, but that's just what you want. That isn't reality. It's not going to be over for a while. Ed, what about what you guys are doing there at ABB? How are you sort of getting on with your folks about the great return, if you will, and the challenges?
Well, we all had a call. The listeners don't know this, but we had a call a few days ago, and we kind of started really comparing notes of what each of our businesses are doing, and it was pretty enlightening that there's so much common things that each of our groups are doing. And if you really think about that, as we start to teach the employees, hey, what's the new norm look like? Here's the way we're going to clean our work centers. Here's how we're going to operate with social distancing. What John's point, here's how we're going to communicate with each other without violating that 6 foot as we start to go through and start to check these boxes, right? And every time we check a box, we have to go back and reevaluate that box being checked, that, hey, this is actually doing what we want it to do, or this is actually starting to put us in a place to where we feel like we can be safe, and the employees can be safe while they're at our facilities working. So what we're asking the employees to do is, hey, when you leave the facility, the things that we're doing at work to manage this virus, be looking for that when you go to a restaurant or when you go to the grocery store.
Yep.
You know, you might have to go to a different grocery store than what you have in the past because of the things that they're doing to help keep the public safe and help keep the employees that work at those facilities safe as well. So you know, just like Antonio said, we're learning this as we go, and so take what you are learning from work. How are we doing business at work, and start observing your surroundings outside of our facilities. Are people that are starting to open up, or businesses that are starting to come online, are they practicing the same things that we're doing at our facilities? If the answer is yes, then you can assume, and we don't want to assume too much, but you can start checking the boxes. You know, they probably have a process in place. They probably have a strategic plan in place. You can start to go through those natural checks on whether or not they're going to do the things that they need to do to be safe and keep the public safe, the same as what we're doing within our facilities, the same that was John's doing at his facility and the people on this call. Another thing is I'd like to add to this is, as we start to check the boxes and we're validating that, hey, you know, the way we're managing our contractors as they come into our facility, the way we're managing how people come into the facilities to go to work, how we're taking those checks and those things. As we start to get down to each of these phases, another interesting piece that we haven't talked about today is this whole training thing. And, you know, here we are on a call, whether it be Teams, Zoom, and so we as an organization are really taking a look at how do we do these virtual trainings that give us the same bang for our buck as if we were to have these face-to-face trainings. And so that's changing a whole different scope. The way we create training material, the way we train. If you think about, you know, OSHA requires us to still maintain our training requirements for our facilities. So you can't pack a room with 30 people now. You can only pack that room with 15 people. So that's creating a whole nother complexity of how we communicate and train our employees, you know, on all the different subjects that they need to be trained on. And so it's forcing us to really think outside of the box and be creative to be able to continue to maintain that communication, to continue to maintain that training, to bring this virtual experience to the public or to the managers and the supervisors, you know, as we continue to become a little bit more familiar with this new norm that we're all experiencing together. So I hope that answers your question. But those are some of the things a little bit that we haven't really talked about yet.
No, Ed, it did. Thank you very much. And of course, like from mine, I know you've told you, but you know, my daughter works at the grocery store here in town, right? So, you know, because that's you know, whatever, more risk. I went there to see what they were doing, talk to the owner of the store. You know, okay, so you're the SafeStart guy, eh? Whatever, you know, type of thing. But you know, and he's showing me his plexiglass and you know all their procedures and everything else, and you know, it was you know, every the conveyor belt wiped every time, every can, every register, your tap thing, all that for the credit card. You know, they're definitely doing their part. Might be something even locally that some of us could recommend too, and that is, you know, go out and audit, do your best job of talking to them, seeing what they've got at the grocery stores, and then recommending the ones that you think are following the right practices to your employees, or saying, you know, I was at such and such a place and I was pretty impressed, or I was at such and such a place and I was concerned, you know, and that might help them out a bit more too. John, what about you folks? I know like you've been operating all along, so it's not like you've got a back to work initiative because everybody's already been there, but you've spent a lot of different things you've talked to me about in terms of helping your workforce out. So yeah, if you could maybe
Yeah,
just share what some of that with us for a few minutes, if you could.
yeah, for sure. So we think that this event is very similar in nature to how 9/11 changed our lives. We don't feel like we'll ever go back to pre 9/11 days, and we won't go back to pre-COVID days in terms of how we operate moving forward. So, like many companies, we've purchased thermal camera systems so that we can check employees' temperatures coming in. That'll be something that we carry on forward. We're not going to simply, hey, the system's in place, and this thing goes away for a few weeks, and we're going to put it in the closet. And next time we have an illness come through, we're going to pull it out of the closet. No, this is going to be part of the new norm. Having that inventory of masks and gloves, so that we can continue operation. One of the biggest challenges that we faced is, as the supply chain shifted towards supplying the frontline workers in the medical field all of these supplies, how do we continue to use or get respirators that we use every day in our operation for various practices? How do we get those those supplies to our people so that we can continue to operate like an essential business? So having that inventory, that's something, as we do the after action review of all of the steps that we've taken, we're going to look at how do we continue to be prepared for whether it's a wave in the fall, or it's the next H1N1 that comes down the pipe 3 years from now, and not let our guard down. One of the most important parts of bringing a workforce back is making them feel secure. And that security is not only with the individuals that you're bringing back, but with their families. One of the things that we implemented during this process was a hotline number. Not only does it have, prompts where you can get just recorded information, but it gives you access to the right people to get your questions answered. And nothing calms fear better than accurate information that you can actually get from a live person. So that is probably one of the biggest, call it a win out of this, is our increased level of communications with the families directly, because
from a live person, John. That was really
from
was
a live
person. So I don't mean to interrupt, but I just thought that was so important, that nothing will calm fear faster than accurate information from a live person. That, obviously the credibility with the live person has to have some sort of pre-establishment, but that is
right.
I mean, that's consistent with what so many, even if I'm thinking about Tipping Point, Malcolm Gladwell, that is so important, right? Live person,
right,
with credibility. Sorry, carry on, by the way.
No, and as you guys are, all the listeners and viewers out there, as you guys are building your programs, build it on a credible source. This is what the CDC is telling us. This is what our Department of Health is telling us. Because if you are saying, hey, I heard this on Facebook, or I saw this on the news, and we should be doing that, you're going to be whipsawed all over the place. Stay consistent with an authoritative source to allow your people to have confidence in saying, hey, this is what we're doing today. And God knows those sources are going to change their minds 3 weeks from now. But hey, we're adapting to the new standards that the CDC is putting out there. So this is, again, an all in this together. It's everyone here at work. It's with their families. It's, people mention the supply chain, making sure your supply chain is up to the task of keeping you up and operating during these challenging times. You may need to bring on a secondary backup supplier just in case, if you're really dependent on a single source, to make sure that you have that flow. Because much like some of the other businesses Ken mentioned that their demand is up, our demand is up in 2020 versus 2019. We didn't expect that going into this environment, but sure enough it is, and we're very blessed but we have to do the right steps as a management team and a leadership group to be able to facilitate that trend continuing throughout the rest of the year and into 2021.
Oh, John, well, John, thank you very much. First, whoops, I guess, oh, am I unmuted? Okay, good. Thanks very much. But by the way, everybody, John can't, he's got to leave a couple minutes early. So we're getting lots of really good questions coming in. I'm going to read a few of them to you. But if you've got a specific question for John, please get it in soon because he's got to leave. He's got to leave at 10 after the hour. The rest of us have got another 5 minutes. It's not like he's leaving too early. Ken, just before I get to you and back to everybody else here, just let me read a few of the questions that have come in, if I could. How to deal with eyes and mind, far from the task, considering the safe distance in a shop floor. To Ken, what do you do specifically for psychological safety? To Anthony at P&G, has P&G stopped production in India during lockdown? That's sort of an interesting little one. How can we start our road construction activities in India? How do you see the workplace changing after the pandemic is over? And I thought, John, the idea that you said there about like the same mindset as with 9/11, like you may want the world to, especially if you travel as much as me, you may want the world to go back to the way it was, but it is never going back to that. And you're never going to be able to take a full bottle of shampoo with you anywhere ever again. And that's just the way it is. But you've got to, there's a denial, and I want to ask Ken too about there's a natural human denial of these things too, right? I don't want to believe the world is never going back. I don't want to believe they've moved my cheese, so to speak. So what will we do with the people who keep wanting to go back to where the cheese was before? How have you handled a positive test in the workplace if you've had one, which I thought was a great question. How can I manage scattered at a job site where workers are coming from home, like rural electrician workers? Are they surveying each employee daily using temperature monitoring, which we got already? Are they planning to test all employees and on what frequency? So just to give you guys a bit of an idea of what's coming up so you can think about it a bit. And Ken, if I could though, just to sort of wrap up the great, or the beginning of the great return, I guess would be more accurate. What in addition or what else would you recommend that we start thinking about in terms of, things coming back on full speed? You guys were actually saying you're going to be going back on more than full speed, correct?
Right. So, as I mentioned earlier, our operations have continued on. So it's really not a question of what we do there. It's really more of an issue of, like some other folks have mentioned, enhancing and making sure, I think somebody mentioned, maybe it was John, that we don't have entropy set in, right? Because here's what we've got.
Yeah.
We've got this, I think, if you look for in a crisis like this, the silver lining, now that we've been in this mode of hygiene as an example, just a simple example of the hygiene requirements that have been put out by CDC and WHO. People have been practicing those, right? There's been a lot of deliberate practice going on. We fortunately, as I said earlier, we have had those practices mandated in our plants based on food safety. However, as has been our experience going on the SafeStart journey as an example, getting people to make that bridge from doing these things every day and all day at work, and then transitioning them out to their everyday life at large, has been somewhat of a challenge, probably not just for us, but for many people. But now we've got this, I think, really strong catalyst of people being extremely aware of the need for hygiene. And I think, if we can, for those who have studied people like Duhigg and James Clear, the people who are really writing a lot these days about habit formation, if we can take down the barriers that make these habits more sustainable and put support systems in place that allow for that to happen, I think that's a great benefit that comes out of this. COVID is just the latest catalyst, but let's face it, good hygiene, hand washing, social distancing, in some cases, the wearing of face mask. I don't think anybody will ever look at people from different parts of the planet the same way anymore. We used to maybe at airports stare at people who wore masks during flu season, like, why do they do that? I think now that becomes more normal, and I think it's a good thing. I think the world probably becomes healthier as a result in the long run with these sorts of things. And in terms of, taking down those barriers between the habits that have been sustained or being sustained now and continuing them so we don't entropy. You know, in our plants, as an example, by again SQF requirement, you know, we actually have to have you know, washing facilities positioned strategically so that, you know, employees, when they're following you know, a pretty rigid hygiene protocol, that, you know, these devices are there, they're accessible, they're maintained, and they're audited, right? So I think if companies were to move in that direction, and it would probably go a long way to helping people not have that drift back into, you know, what was the old normal, because I don't think there's ever going to be really an old normal again.
Nope.
No, I don't. I agree. I agree. Although I do think, you know, like John said, there'll be, you know, getting people to accept that this is going to be permanent. I don't think that the majority of people have accepted that yet. That's just my opinion. I don't think, and when I say that, I'm saying because that hasn't even really crossed their radar screen that is the case, right? You know, so there'll be some natural. John, you mentioned some things too about just a lot of visual help with people, posters and some things like that. Could you just elaborate on that just for a second or two longer?
Yeah. We've taken the opportunity to really, you know, try and enhance our conversations out on the shop floor and, you know, in the office with those visual reminders. And a lot of them we've shared with the SafeStart organization in terms of, you know, using the terminology. You know, we've been on the SafeStart journey for more than 10 years now. And so as we are looking at the different opportunities out there, how do we constantly put it in the path of someone's work? You know, where are their eyes going? Where are the opportunities where they can be reminded in that moment to make the best decision possible? So whether it's floor clings, posters on the wall, just having the instructions to, in a conference room, for example, hey, here's the 3 things that you need to do before you use the conference room. Here's the 3 things hygiene-wise that you need to do afterwards. So helping them learn, build those habits as they go. And then again, you know, going to the look at others concept is always benchmarking and bringing best practices in, and also making examples of, hey, here's someone who came up with a really creative idea, and sharing those best practices both internally and externally within the organization. Those are all steps any organization can do to help build those habits faster in their people, because, you know, we have, again, grown and adapted with this for 6 to 8 weeks. You know, the challenge that a company who has shuttered their doors for 6 to 8 weeks to then turn the key on and try and put all of this into place, that's a big challenge. And I would encourage you strongly to really think out how you're going to do that. How are you going to build those habits? What's the conversation look like? What does the tone look like? And make sure that you create that personal all-in together. This has to be coming from the heart. We're doing these things to protect each other and making sure that we are going to get through this together. And, you know, we've had the conversations with family members who are sick at home, and, you know, just trying to make sure, is there anything that you need? Being that support structure for a family so that they know, hey, you can count on us. We're going to help get you through this if you've got a sick family member at home.
John, excellent. Ed, and I want to get to you and Teg, obviously, and talk with you guys for just a second, but if you will, just before I forget the thought, because Anthony and I were talking about this yesterday, and he's had a lot of experience in the like it or not category with the masks and the personal protective equipment, and I just found it really interesting listening to him talk about the personal systems and habits that you have to develop so that you don't forget the mask in the car, or you don't have you know, almost like the sunglasses and the car keys and the phone, right, Anthony? Like that this is a whole new set of personal skills which has error all over it, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So let's take, for example, the facility I'm sitting in, which I have no idea why the lights just turned out in this room, but I'll go figure that out when our call is done. I'm now sitting on Paradise Island. We've separated all of our facilities into cohorts for contact tracing, whether it be plants or whether it be some of our technical centers. So the new name of my work area in this building is Paradise Island. It's being decorated at the perimeter in purple as a unique identifier. But one of the things that we're changing our behavior is we're planning on using
looking like paradise there, Anthony. I'm saying.
Yeah. Well, we'll work on the lighting. But one of the things that we've had to do is we are instituting barrier mask protection as an adjunct to social distancing. So when we're in public spots, and it really has been, I've worn respirators and masks throughout my career. And as a toxicologist, sometimes I had to wear scrubs and masks all day. And I've really had to get back into this habit of, in the car, I pull a new mask out of the bag, I hand sanitize before I put it on. I get out of the car, I come in and get my thermal screening, I answer my pre-screening questions. And again, throughout the course of the day, when I eat or when I'm in a conversation with all of you, I've taken the mask on, put it in a safe spot. I'll hand sanitize again, just in case I touch my face or something else. And so there's really this habits development. And then on the way out, I wear the mask all the way to the car. I hand sanitize before I enter the car. After take my mask off, put it in a plastic bag. Hand sanitize again and off to home. So there is this cadence of activity that most people don't have to consider. And I think what has helped me out is the fact that I wear respiratory protection in the workplace.
Well, yeah, exactly. But just like, somebody who doesn't drive a car doesn't have to keep track of their car keys. But the first time you get a car, I mean, I've never met anybody who's never lost their car keys. You know what I mean? So like as we all learn to develop the personal systems to go with this, I think there'll be, I just thought that was very interesting. Ed, in terms of, that the world is never, like it or not, going to go back to normal. Maybe some people sort of think I don't really need to change permanently because there'll be a vaccine. I can just ride it out. But what have you been doing with the folks, with your folks at ABB to sort of let them know, about the habits and the permanent shift and stuff like that?
Yeah, to finish Anthony's story, you get to the house, you go into the garage, shut the garage door, you take your clothes off, you put them in a trash bag, you make sure you don't wear your shoes into the house, and you go straight to the shower, right? So, you don't want to take your street clothes or the clothes that you've been working in all day and roam through your house and sit on the sofa and do some of those things, even if you're not dirty, So even if you work in an office setting or if you're visiting the office, so those things are different. You keep the stuff that has potentially to be contaminated while you are working, and you don't want to bring those into your home. So that's a much different way of thinking than what we probably did in the past. So again, it's about the training. I'm not as close to this as the guys on this call. We have a task force, our security group, and we started recognize this to be a potential risk to the business a few years ago. So we had an advantage. Our business has done a really good job at preparing for this. We have badge access within our facility, so we can really control where people go. We control who comes into our facilities really well. If we're trying not to cross-contaminate, meaning that if you're not working at a facility, then you probably don't have access to that facility at this time like you did in the past. And another thing, to what Anthony and John and everybody's been talking about is there is no perfect supplier. So, that means we have to reach out and put our arms around the suppliers that we're using and help them come up to speed and to develop some of the programs that they might need to create a safe work environment. They might not have the resources or the availability that we have, being a large company. And so we need to bring them up to speed very quickly so that they would be able to continue to service our needs. Because business is as usual, right? We're all of our sites are still up and running. We still got to build product. and we got to keep people safe in doing so. So it's back to that communication. Be aware of your surroundings. Make sure that you don't put yourself in harm's way. Are you putting you and your family in the line of fire when you leave the organization? But to John's point, we need to make sure our employees, while they're at work, feel safe, and at the same time, we need to make sure that their family members feel safe, and we get them access to help if they need help. And then one last piece is, we're exploring this whole mindfulness leadership, and that behavioral side of that, and that psychological piece of that. What does that mindfulness leadership look like? We're all in this together. We all have stresses. We all have concerns. The markets are changing. We're all watching what's going on in TV. We're seeing that might not be building as much product as we did. So that whole mindfulness and bringing that piece to help everybody's concerns and the issues that they might have both at home. We have people that I've been working from home for 3 years now, so I had a big advantage over some people that have never worked out of a home office, and they're trying to juggle kids, and they got two parents are trying to be on conference calls all day. So there's a lot of challenges for the worker that they've never had to experience, the same as challenges for the businesses. So how do we help them be successful and give them the tools and the resources that they need to be successful? Because if they're successful, then we're successful. And if we're all successful, then the communities that we all live in start to become successful as well. So hope that answered your question.
Well, Ed, for sure. Yeah. And I mean, it was definitely one of the concerns from, the European panelists brought up, or things, is that, yes, we've found some improvements in terms of working at home. And, we've had some people say we're never going to go back to having 7,000 people working in the office in the bank again, because we don't need to. But we've had, people really wrestling with productivity issues at home because they're not used to it. Whereas, like you, I've been working at home for years and years, so I'm very used to being unproductive. This is nothing new for me. Tag and I were talking about this yesterday. A lot of people are really struggling with this, but I'm not one of them, right? My mother's 89 years old. She says, Larry, I just can't believe the lack of productivity lately during this crisis. And I said, I know you can't talk about it, Mom, but how many national security projects are you working on right now? I know you can't tell me the specifics of them, just like John can't tell me what that thing is actually a part of. But really, just how much have you got going on at 89 years old? But I think everybody, it is different. It is a bit of a struggle. There were two questions. We now are over 30 questions coming in, guys. We're never going to be able to get to all of it. We'll try to sort. Some of them, though, because John's got to go in a couple of minutes. They said, can John and or Ed, and I think some of them just don't know that all of you are familiar with SafeStart concepts and techniques, but they're saying, could you elaborate for the people watching who are familiar with SafeStart, how you're directly tying the certs into COVID? I think that was basically what they were trying to add. What are some of the practical applications of the certs as it relates to COVID and hygiene? Was the exact question. So, John, you want to start?
John, you can tackle
a minute or two.
All right. Obviously, the first one is self-trigger, and being able to understand the circumstances that you are placing yourself in, and just say, I'm going to use the vending machine. Our company has elected to have vending machines, but we also have bottles of hand sanitizer everywhere. So the first thing I'm going to do before I use a vending machine is I'm going to put hand sanitizer on my hand and do what I need to do on the control panel. And guess what? As soon as I get my product out of the vending machine, next thing I'm going to do is use hand sanitizer again. And so, and that's really no different than, okay, I'm coming down the hallway and there's two other people walking in the hallway. Am I going to step back, allow them to pass, so I'm not going to get within that 6-foot distance, and allow them to social distance, allow me to social distance, and in the state of Illinois, effective about 11 hours from now, if I were to pass them in the hallway, I'd need to put a face covering on. If I maintain my social distancing, if I have that self-triggering mentality, I'm going to step back into my office, allow them to pass, and not even have to worry about putting a face mask on because I've maintained that social distancing. Another one is looking at others. All right. So I'm going to absolutely make sure that I'm doing the right thing. And if I'm not doing the right thing, I hope my coworkers are going to call me out on it to help build my habits so that I remember and do that analyze post call. Like, why didn't I remember to social distance? Why didn't I remember to wash my hands after using that piece of equipment or whatever the case may be? Mm-hmm. So there are so many ways that you can use the critical error reduction techniques to help your people understand and practice the safe techniques. And I do apologize. I do need to jump off the webinar, but I've appreciated it. And Larry, if there are any of those questions directed specifically to me, please send them my way, and I'll do my best to email the audience member back and get them an answer. So thank you all for your time, and appreciate being here.
Mute. John, thank you very much too. Yeah, I was just going to say you got to get going. And we'll share everybody's if they want your contact info. Hopefully you can join us again next week too, John. And there's like we're at almost 40 questions right now, and some really good questions as well too. So John, thank you very much. We'll see you next week. And Ed, if you could just sort of carry on a bit, and then I'm gonna while you're doing this, I'll try to do two things at once and just grab one or two other questions here and bounce those off maybe Ken or Anthony and tag, and we'll have to kind of wrap up, you guys, because we're only about 5 minutes left. But go ahead, Ed, if you wouldn't mind. And
yeah, just to echo what John's saying, it's that line of fire, right? We have looked at the line of fire in our surroundings that we've become very familiar with we work, but things are different. Back in the day when somebody wasn't wearing their safety glasses, we would come up to them and say, hey, I'm concerned about your safety. Do you mind wearing your safety glasses? In this case, we try not to have those close quarter contacts. So it's about the signals are different. The line of fire, the way we look for line of fire, the way we think about line of fire is much different. It's about bringing in those habits to be courteous. If, like John said, if you have somebody that's walking up to you, make sure that you honor their personal space and you stop before you get within that 6 feet. And it's about constantly reinforcing and being a good steward for what good habits are moving forward. So there's so many different ways to add the SafeStart context into it. But if you really, it's just like any job that you're getting ready to do. Ask yourself, where is the line of fire? Where is the potential for me to get hurt? And then if you really think about that line of fire, then you can start to recognize those risks or those areas that you might be of concern. And so then you could start to practice those good habits around the self-triggering piece to self-trigger. Just like the handrails, we as safety professionals say, grab the handrail every time you go down the stairs. Now it's make sure you put your hand under the hand sanitizer before you touch anything, right? And do not assume that you're not contaminated. Do not assume, oh, I just washed my hands, so I'm good, right? Always make sure, there's many different ways to do that and create that communication around the SafeStart concepts and this COVID-19. And Larry, you put out some articles. There's been some publishings here and there from SafeStart I've seen and read about this and that journey. So it's some good stuff.
Well, Ed, at least it's nice. At least one person read it. That's always encouraging to hear. It is. I do put a lot of effort into this stuff as well. Ken and Anthony here, I almost feel embarrassed about asking this. It's just such a good question, and please do not nobody's holding you to the answer. What do you think the role of large employers will be in the ramp up of testing across the United States? So maybe I think it's your turn, kind of, Ken. I'm not
Yeah.
entirely sure who's up next, but we got a couple minutes, so maybe just take a couple minutes, Ken, and then we'll wrap up with Anthony and Teg, and we'll invite everybody to come back next week, and we'll we'll have more capacity. We could only have 500 people for this. So what do you think the role of large employers will be in terms of, well, leading, I think, is really what they're getting at here. At least that's what I'd love to see. I'd love to see leading corporations leading this, as opposed to some of the public figures I've seen leading this.
So Larry, I mean, I'll take a stab at it.
Yeah.
Obviously, I don't know the answer to that no more than anybody else would, but clearly, large corporations, it's an opportunity, to step forward. They're typically going to have much more resource base. They're going to have a lot more, connections and bandwidth and all these other things that make it possible for, large organizations to make a real difference. And I would say that, from my own company's perspective, to sort of tie it in, like so many companies today, we're really into the sustainability world, and really, this is a great opportunity, I think, to expand upon that relative to to the second element of social responsibility. So while I can't say specifically, what companies like mine are going to do, clearly you're seeing other companies step up, at least in the U.S., for things like ventilator manufacturing and mask manufacturing, PPE. I think there's going to be a lot more opportunity for that, and it's a great opportunity as well for, expansion of all things related to emotional intelligence and just being more people-centric in business at large. And I hope to see a lot of companies, including my own, taking that step.
That, Ken, that's a really interesting thing, kind of a comment that came out of the pre-meeting with the European folks yesterday. And at the end of it, I said, gosh, I almost feel like singing "I Wish It Was Christmas Every Day" sort of thing. In other words, we're seeing the best of people brought out in all of this, and the hope that would actually endure, right? In other words, we wouldn't all go back to being our cranky old selves again after this, right?
If there's really a time for conscious capitalism to emerge, this has to be it, right? I mean, this has to be the time when people of good mind and good spirit step forward, and it could be the rewriting of business as we understand it. I think a lot of things are going to change for the positive, and certainly, there's a lot of companies who are doing great things in this way even before COVID, and I think this now just offers an even greater catalyst for more of that to happen. So I look forward with a lot of optimism, and it's a great time to be in business management, frankly, because I think we're on the cusp of some major positive changes in this space.
Yeah, I do too. Well, certainly, the most common answer I get to "how's it going" in 66 countries is same old, same old. You're not hearing that anymore, that's for sure. Anthony, maybe if you could just kind of a little on that in terms of the role leading corporations should be potentially stepping up to, and then we're out of time already, guys. But like I said, I'll talk to you forever, so we'll carry on for a bit, and those of you that have to go, we understand it's only an hour and 15 minutes, but I certainly want to hear your answer, Anthony. So go ahead.
Well, the lights went out again, but I'll try my best. So, as I said, we've had this citizenship program, and I think this has really helped our families, our workers, really bring the company together. From making face shields, ventilator parts, using our converting capability to make masks, and even down to something as simple as deal with the shortage of respiratory fit test solutions. We've produced enough fit test solution in 5 days to fit test about 20,000 nurses and doctors. So that's been really aspirational. And yes, I mean, like many large U.S. multinational companies, we're looking at both PCR testing and antibody testing, and seeing how that fits into the portfolio, protecting our workers and our families, but also the communities in which we operate. And so, I think many major employers are looking at social responsibility and citizenship differently out of this process, and using what technology skills we have to see how we can help. But to answer the question, I think private industry is going to have to play a role as long as COVID is around, or the next virus comes around. to build a capability to serve
Mm-hmm.
the communities in which they operate in clinical types of testing where we have that capability.
Now, Anthony, I think that's an excellent point too. That the reality is, think about it, everybody. This isn't going to be the end of it. Like this isn't the last pandemic. There's going to be more. I mean, it you know, exactly when we don't know, but that's the nature of viruses and things like this. Is that they do, you know, things happen, right?
This is my
Ted,
6th and 17 years, and that's what I've been communicating to leadership here. Is there will be another one at some point.
well, I mean, it's worth betting on, except for nobody does.
Yes.
But the reality, right? Up until, you know, maybe they will now, but you know, up until now, no. Tag, if you could, and I know I don't know how many people are still on still on Tag, probably a great number of them though. So, do you want, if you can, just sort of sum up anything I've missed, Tag, or anything sort of important? We've got now over, like I said, 40 questions, so we'll definitely we'll try to get an email out to everybody with you know, the number one, you know, the top 10 questions at least that we'll make sure we ask next week. But if you can, just
Sure.
wrap it up for us, Tag.
Okay, I'll try. Well, first of all, can I just say this has been absolutely fantastic. It's been phenomenal. It's the conversation that we've had. I thought when we were getting at the end, especially like the last half an hour, we were talking about kind of the way that this sense of community is very palpable for a lot of organizations at the moment, and that's come through very, very strongly in all the organizations I've been talking to. Something else, Ed, well, everyone's been talking about, but Ed and Ken in particular, you've mentioned this way that leadership has heightened emphasis on safety in the way they're interacting with people. Ed, you were talking about, I wrote it down, mindfulness leadership, I think is what you said. And a lot of organizations are saying, you know, their leaders are talking to their people, I hate to say this out loud, but almost like humans for the first time. They're engaging with them on a one-to-one kind of basis, and they're getting that buy-in. Organizations are seeing improvements in safety performance, ironically, with all this is going on, because it's that heightened kind of thing. And, you know, and they're wondering about how we can sustain it. The conversation around, you know, rollout of new rules, the social distancing issues that everyone's facing, you know, the different ideas that you came up with, that was superb. This piece around sources of information being sensible and using credible sources and how we share that communication flows down. And then the piece about, you know, the self-triggering and habits and looking at others and all these kind of skills as individuals that we can learn. Again, absolutely fantastic. The last comment I'd like to make, though, is that all these conversations that I've heard over, not just this one, but over the last sort of like 4 or 5 weeks, every single one has had some sort of golden nugget in it for me. Right, and every leader I'm talking to, somebody comes up with an idea or a thought that maybe it's not quite what other people have thought of before, the way they viewed it. So from a learning perspective, almost going back to Anthony, something you said right at the beginning, there's so many learning opportunities for us as organizations and leaders in this that, you know, that we need to maximize out on what we're trying to do with it. That's all I'd say.
Okay, well that was great, and we would definitely, you know, you're definitely out of time now, Larry. But anyhow, I would like to just sort of tell everybody, first of all, thanks very much for joining the audience, that is. But just to give you an idea of the range of questions that are coming in. For instance, how do you balance HIPAA, HIPPA, the HIPAA laws in the United States, with contact traveling? Are you violating HIPAA by informing workers they may have been exposed to proximity, you know, to, so, you know, questions. By the way, Anthony is a PhD in law as well too. I didn't mention that when I was introducing him, because I think he's actually quite likable. So I didn't want to mention that. No, really, and interesting too. But just kidding. But so from technical questions like that to people saying, you know, please, you made a joke about the crystal ball, but we really would like to know their best guess. So, and then things that are just almost the other end. You know, employees and organizations are in a very panicked state. So how do we help people get back from that panic state And I know you've all talked to me before about how you've been communicating with your folks about the employee assistance program, and if people are, you know, not, they're past frayed at the edge, or things are starting to rip, right? So many good things that we would really like to come back to. We're certainly not going to have, we're certainly not going to be able to get to it today. So I would just like to say thank you to all of the panelists on behalf of all of the people at SafeStart. Over 50 people around the world at SafeStart wanted to watch you guys today, and we had to tell them that they had to give their registrations up for, you know, for clients and for other people. So hopefully we'll be at least able to get the recording to them. But thank you all very much for your time. We'll have you back next week, and we'll get an email out to everybody about some of the top questions. And I agree with you, Tag. We'll try to have the format a little different, so there's just more time for kind of the open questions and answers. I'd say sort of maybe about 20 minutes for just a quick update from everybody, and then we'll move into the new questions right after that. So again, thank you very much, everybody. Thanks again for your time. And on behalf of the audience, I'd also like to say thank you very much for the information and the insight, and also your willingness to share beyond the webinars here. Everybody, you'll get their contact information, and they've all said they'd be willing to help you and with any questions we might have. Again, not guaranteeing the answer to anything, because we're all in this for the first time, and all. Okay, so again, thanks very much, everybody, and we'll see you next week. For those of you who do have some associates in Europe, we'll send you the time for Europe. I believe it is Wednesday next week, and I think it is 9 a.m. UK, 10 a.m. in Central Europe. But we will have all that confirmed with an email. Okay, so thanks again, everybody, and have a great Friday and a great weekend as well. And good job, everybody, on the hands in the face. I think I don't think one of you touched your face once. Well done, well done. I know I had to a couple times with the Kleenex, but anyhow, good job. Okay, thanks a lot, everybody. Bye-bye.
Be safe, everyone.